All right. Hello and welcome to CASE's Parent University. I'm Sherry Maupin-Slata. I'm a member of the CASE IST and I am the moderator this evening. At CASE, our instructional support team is made up of professionals from various backgrounds and areas of expertise that provide support within gen ed and special education settings to all of our member districts. Tonight, our presenters are Tracy Kunce and Kearney. Tracy is an IST coach and specializes in supports for executive functioning. She is a speech-language pathologist by trade. She has worked at CASE for 15 years and has 20 years of experience in the field. Kim is also an IST coach and an assistive technology facilitator. She is a speech-language pathologist by trade as well. She has worked at CASE for 7 years and has 14 years of experience in the field. Tonight's presentation is Executive Functioning 101. What is executive functioning and how does it impact my child at school? A few reminders before I turn it over to the presenters. Please keep yourself muted during the session. Feel free to use the chat. I will be posting our IST's email address in the chat. If you should have any questions after tonight's session, you feel free to email us there. Also, we're recording the first half of tonight's session during the presentation. When we get to the end of the presentation, we're going to stop recording and take questions at that time. I think that's all I have. Take it away, Kim and Tracy.
Excellent. Thank you, Sherry.
Thanks, Sherry.
Welcome, everybody, to Executive Functioning 101. So we would just like to begin by talking a little bit about, there we go, what is executive functioning? So if you've never heard of executive functioning, you may not have heard any of these definitions, but if you have, you may have heard many different definitions of executive functioning. And as I've described this to people over the last couple of years and listened to many experts talk about it, I've heard a ton of different definitions, some that are very long and involved and some that are quite simple. And those are the ones that I really like. So at its core, executive functioning is the skills people use to plan, organize, problem solve, set and achieve goals. And quite simply, it's just the skills that we need to get things done. And this is absolutely anything in our lives. This can be from planning your big vacation or a presentation that you need to do for your job. It can be completing a math assignment or writing a paper. It can also be the skills that you need to develop a friendship or to walk up to someone and talk to them for the first time. It may even be as simple as tying your shoe or getting in line. Executive functioning are skills that we use all through our lives, every single day, in all the things that we do. There are lots of different things that are a part of our executive functioning skills, and they can be broken down into many different areas. And again, if you've heard of this before, you may have heard of many different areas that are explained when talking about executive functioning. These are some of them, and they include planning, which is the ability to figure out how to accomplish our goals. So this is thinking about what needs to be done, the steps that we need to take. There's also organization, and that's the ability to develop and maintain a system to keep your materials and plans. So when you're thinking about your children, this may be at school, their desks or their lockers. At home, it may be their bedrooms. When you think about yourselves, this could be any other room in the house, your organization of your kitchen or the basement or the garage, any type of place where you need some sort of system to keep your stuff together. Time management is a big part of executive functioning. And this includes the ability to understand the concept of time and also how long is it going to take you to complete and accomplish tasks effectively. To be able to understand what time looks and feels like is a really important skill in executive functioning. Task initiation is that ability to start tasks. to get started, even when it's something that we don't like to do. It's really easy to initiate something that we enjoy and we're motivated by, but we also have to be able to start tasks that we don't like so much. So that is an important skill to learn and develop. Working memory is a process where you take information and you hang on to it and you can manipulate it and use it for later use. Metacognition, that's where you're thinking about your own thinking. And that's something that develops a little bit later on. Self-control, or as I like to think of it more, as self-regulation. And this can be including anything, your thoughts, your actions, your emotions, being able to regulate all these different functions of yourself is really important as we go through life. So when you think of our little kids, this may be regulating your inhibitions, like not touching a hot stove or not crossing the street without looking both ways. And later on, this may be regulating your emotions, like not punching your sister in the shoulder when you get mad, and being able to have a conversation rather than being aggressive with things. There's a lot of self-regulation that we need to learn and develop over the years to get us through life in a functional way. And finally, attention. Attention can be looked at as sustained attention, being able to attend to tasks for longer periods of time, and also divided attention, being able to shift your attention from one thing to another and divide it between more than one thing. So these are skills that all play within each other. They all play off of each other. They're very interrelated. None of them stand alone. And we see them across the course of our whole lives.
Now we're going to take a look at social skills. So social skills continue to develop throughout young childhood, and we continue to develop our social skills our whole lives. There are many different social skills that we ask children to develop and to use throughout their school day. But when we're looking towards the future, they're often considered soft skills. We'll hear that term pretty often. And in the job market, that's one of the most selling points for somebody, is if they have a good set of soft skills. And those are things like work ethic and understanding their emotions and being able, like Tracy was saying, to regulate emotion. And it's active listening and being collaborative and being flexible. And you can see all of these things begin to develop in really early childhood and continue on through the school age. But when we look more closely, we can really see, as Tracy was just talking about, all those executive functions, how those are really necessary for us to develop our social functions as well. If we are going to work collaboratively with someone else, we need to be respectful of planning and organization. We need to have good self-control or self-regulation. We need to be able to think about what our thoughts and what we are doing. And we look at things like empathy and understanding other people and looking at patience and flexibility, all of these skills that help us to develop and build relationships and connect with each other as humans are really based in many of our executive functions. So we're going to go through the school age and kind of work through executive function development and social development and see how these things interrelate.
Okay, yes, so as Kim mentioned, we're going to kind of do a side-by-side of some of the skills that we expect kids to be able to do at different ages, and what it looks like through an executive function lens as well as a social emotional lens. And these are things that these are the expectations that we have for these kids at these different ages. But we have to remember that the skills are developing throughout the ages, and not all kids are necessarily ready to perform all these skills at that time. So we have to keep the idea that there is a range of what they can accomplish at all of these ages. But at the preschool age, some executive tasks that require executive skill will include running simple errands. So this is like one-step directions, performing basic self-help tasks with reminders, and inhibiting behaviors like don't bite, hit, push, run into the street, touch a hot stove. So those things are all going to rely on your planning, your working memory, some self-regulation. That's the beginnings of all of those executive function skills.
And just like Tracy's saying, the beginning of those executive function skills also lend very nicely into the social emotional development. Show and verbalize a wider range of emotion and be spontaneously caring and kind, considerate of others, and playing with other kids. They're starting to form those bonds, separating from caregivers with a little bit more ease. And that's initiation. And that is, like Tracy was saying, being able to plan and consider your own actions.
Between kindergarten and second grade, some of the tasks that require executive skill are running errands with 2 to 3 step directions. At this time, they have to bring papers to and from schools with reminders. Quite often we'll see those folders that are labeled to return to school or keep at home. And they'll also get some verbal reminders for that, where they're also expected to be able to raise their hand in class, follow the safety rules, keep hands to self. So it just kind of starts to up the ante a little bit as they get a little bit older. We're working a little bit more on that working memory, that 2 to 3 step direction, and they're starting to learn how to plan a little bit. Again, we've got a lot of support at this age, and that's how we are starting to directly teach them to develop those executive functions.
At this time, they're also starting to play with other kids more and become more social. That increased independence is really seen socially by initiating some of those relationships a little bit more. And then just like Tracy said, with bringing papers to and from school, having a little bit more responsibility, testing boundaries, but still eager to please and help, which goes right along with inhibiting those behaviors, right? And understanding embarrassment, that really comes into play at this age.
Okay, then 3rd through 5th grade, you can just see the lists are going to get a little bit longer as we go through the ages, because more is expected of our kids. So the developmental tasks requiring executive skill includes running errands. We're gonna add on a time delay or greater distance. So there's a greater play on the working memory and planning on this one. We have to think about a longer time, a farther distance that you have to go. Now they have to bring books, papers, assignments to and from school and keep track of their belongings. So that organization is getting more complex. Completing homework or planning simple projects. So you have some future planning in here as well that's starting to develop, and keeping track of their daily schedule. Some of those extracurriculars are starting to be added. And while they're between 3rd and 5th grade, you still have most of that support coming from adults. They're still hopefully getting some cues and reminders about when that's happening. You have soccer every Tuesday and Thursday. Let's put that on the calendar. If they can start to see that, that's going to help teach them and develop that planning skill to keep track of their own daily schedule. And also now they're starting to self-regulate behavior on a little bit higher level. When the teacher's out of the classroom, they have to follow some other rules, refrain from making rude comments, and use more polite manners.
And with social skill development, this is the age where kids start to share secrets and jokes and inside jokes with their friends, and they're more aware of others' perceptions. We'll see kids start to developing their own identity and trying to pull away from some family activity or conversation. They're kind of into their own thing, and It's also, they can be pretty affectionate, silly, and curious still, but you may start to see some of that rude, selfish, argumentative, it's just more of that pushing boundaries, more of that trying to find their own place and help regulate themselves and who they are in this world, trying to look around and seeing where they're at.
And then we get to the fun middle school years. And that was kind of a good lead in, that last one, I think. And here we're doing a lot more organization. I talk with a lot of middle school kids and teachers, and I know at this point they're really expected to have a system to plan and organize their schoolwork, as well as organize their days and know when assignments are due. So they have more complex school and activity schedules, and they plan and complete long-term projects, plan and managing their time. So all of this going in together, I'm always thinking of having those planners and agendas, and they do have that expectation that they should be doing a lot of these things independently. But this is an area that I do see that kids struggle with if they hadn't learned it before they got to middle school. So we do need to teach them and help them develop the skills so that they know how to plan and organize, and that they can develop their systems for organizing and keeping track of things as well. The inhibition, they have to inhibit rule breaking in the absence of authority figure. So now, they're given a little bit more independence. They might be left in the classroom alone more often, or even at home, and they're expected to follow some greater rules, and hopefully they do, and they'll continue to get more independence with that.
I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by the social skill and social emotional development that we have listed here of middle schoolers. Thinking more logically, but also more introspective and moody. And that introspective starts to show us some of that metacognition, show us some of that, okay, this is what I'm thinking about. This is an understanding what others are thinking about me, valuing friends and others' opinions more and more, and trying to figure out how to fit in new clothing or hairstyles, new mannerisms. I'm sure everyone has memories of their own from their middle school days of a fashion risk you took to try to fit in, or something that you did to try to get in with your peers that maybe didn't feel super authentic to you. It's trying to figure out, where am I and how do I fit into this group or with my peers.
And then in high school, it's more complex. It's another level. So by this age, kids are managing their schoolwork effectively every day, creating following timelines for long-term projects. They may have things that go over weeks or even a month. They also have to adjust their effort in response to teacher feedback. That's going to play back again to that metacognition. They have to think about their own thinking a little bit. What do other people think about me? What are my thoughts about this? And have some perspective on some things. Establishing long-term goal and course of action for meeting that goal, and completing graduation requirements or career readiness. So at this point, they can see a little bit farther into the future and really start to make some longer term plans, and really do some good future thinking about where they're going to go next. So that planning gets a little bit farther into the future than it was when they were younger. And also when it comes to time management, they have a little more control over their own free time. So they get to choose if they're going to make good use of that leisure time. And they also are responsible for inhibiting reckless and dangerous behavior.
There's a lot of metacognition during the social emotional development during this age. Discovering your strengths and weaknesses, thinking about what you are good at, what's going well for you, and some things that you may be struggling with. Showing pride in your successes, really valuing those social relationships and spending a lot of time with friends and striving to be more independent.
So we went through all of the different age brackets up through high school. And I think one thing that we wanted to point out too was, I thought this was really important, of just thinking about what is generally expected as far as attention for kids at different age, especially right now when things are so back and forth and there's a lot of remote learning. Just to keep in mind developmentally that attention spans are maybe even a little shorter than we expect, but generally children can maintain focus or maintain on task for 2 to 3 minutes per year of age. So if we look kind of right in the middle here, a 10-year-old child generally can be expected to attend or maintain focus for 20 to 30 minutes. Now, this is a range. Every kid is different. I wouldn't hold them specifically to this, but just kind of think about that as a guideline when you're thinking about, how long they're on their calls or how long they're sitting in front of the computer. And we want to make sure we're thinking about appropriate breaks for our kiddos and, knowing what's expected. There are limits for everybody, and we think that every kid just doesn't have the attention for things, but they're only expected to have so much attention. And it gets longer as we get older. So I think that's just a good thing to keep in mind. Because as our attention gets longer as we get older, our executive functions are also developing along with that. So we're able to do more. We're able to plan more. We're able to remember more. We're able to manage our time better. So all of these things develop together. Okay, so we talked about the typical executive function development, but sometimes we have to think about, what does executive dysfunction look like? Sometimes we know it's not following that typical path. And executive dysfunction can look a lot of different ways. And these are just some of the behaviors or some of the external actions you may see that could be representative of executive dysfunction. You may see tantrums, which could be representative of not being able to manage emotions appropriately. There may be feelings of overwhelm, and that could be for a variety of different reasons, whether it's not being able to understand, or it could be a result of not planning well and having too much work to do, or someone being chronically late, little miss late there, having trouble managing time, confused, lost, unclear. That again could be overwhelm or not understanding, or any number of things. We also see the disorganization, the messy desk or the messy locker. You can see these things that could be a result of some sort of executive dysfunction. And in the bottom, you see that's our screen with just the initial on there. We see that a lot with our kids right now. And while sometimes it may mean absolutely nothing, sometimes there may be something behind it that it could be overwhelm, it could be confusion, it could be any number of things. But sometimes that's the outward sign that we see that tells us that we need to look a little further, because there may be something behind it that we want to look at a little bit more, that may need a little support. Okay, so we wanted to think, what does this look like? What does a child who is struggling with executive functions look like in school and socially? This is just an example that we made up. This is Jaden, our case study. And in school, Jaden is a very happy kid. He has a positive attitude, but he might have a lot of trouble finding his materials when you ask him, where's that assignment from yesterday? He might say, I have it, I did it, it's here, let me find it, I still can't find it. maybe it's in my backpack. He's looking all over. He knows he has it, but he never just can come up with it. He always seems to be just a step behind the other kids. He's going to get it done, but everybody's got things done right before he does. He's just a little bit behind. He has trouble following directions that he hears from the teacher. May need things repeated a lot, may need them rephrased. And he takes a long time to get his assignments or his homework done.
And socially and with his friends, he may be misinterpreting situations, which leads to his feelings getting easily hurt, or maybe him hurting other people's feelings. He might get upset or angry over small problems, things that seem kind of inconsequential, and he has difficulty understanding that it isn't that big of a deal. And he may be considered a sore loser and has a hard time with some of that self-regulation when things aren't going his way. And maybe has some difficulty with flexibility if he doesn't respond well when plans change. That becomes really difficult for him to process and for him to understand.
So these are all possible things that we may see externally of a child who is having trouble developing his executive functions.
So what might cause executive dysfunction? Well, we often hear about it as part of a disability such as autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, a language disorder. It also can just be a standalone. You may not have an underlying disability that is contributing to your difficulty with executive function.
Uh-oh, I think Kim froze.
Oh no. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, great. Where did I leave off?
Standalone.
Okay, thank you. So standalone, you may not have a disability that is leading or causing your executive dysfunction. It may be truly that is the only thing that you have going on. There are also a lot of biological things that can play into this. I'm sure we've all been hangry before, right? If we're hungry and all of a sudden we're not managing our emotions very well, or I'm really tired and I can't find my keys and I don't know where my computer charger is, and my organization is I have a lack of organization, that may be due to a lack of sleep or being overtired. Environmental stressors, things like a worldwide pandemic or an election might be causing some stress in your life. Trauma and things that kids right now seem to be facing: decreased play and activity and increased use of technology or screen time. So these are just some of the things that may cause executive dysfunction. And all of our levels of executive function are variable day to day. We all have different access throughout our lifetimes, and we all have experienced that. We have days where we are on and we have days that we are off. And those days that we are off are the days that we're experiencing some of that executive dysfunction.
Yep. I think we all have at some point during this fall, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. And to end with, we just want to share with you that just a couple of quotes that we found or kind of live by too. And one is by Ross Green, who says that kids do well if they can. I think it's really important to note that a lot of these kids, like the case Jaden that we presented, we see a lot of these things in a lot of kids. And it's important to know that even though they may be showing us certain behaviors, or it looks like they don't want to do things, or some will say they're unmotivated or lazy, I say that's not true. They do well if they can. We need to teach them some skills. We just got to figure it out. What is the skill that they're missing? So that's really important.
Yes, and kids are doing the best they can with the brain they have, the environment they're in, and the life experiences that they go through. So really just considering the whole child when we're looking at areas of difficulty and where we can help support is our main goal.
Yes. So please come back on December 8th. We will talk about some strategies to help support executive function, both academically and socially. And we would love to share with you some great strategies. But until then, does anybody have any questions?